The 1990s weren't just about Saturday morning cartoons. They were about worlds colliding in the strangest, wildest ways. Characters who never should have met suddenly found themselves fighting side by side, or trading jokes across universes that felt impossible to mix. From superheroes uniting to absurd comedy mashups, these crossovers were short-lived, bizarre, and unforgettable. But here's the real question. Do you remember them? Or did they slip through the cracks of nostalgia? Stick around. Your childhood might have been stranger than you recall. The Jetsons meet the Flintstones, 1990. When two of Hanna-Barbera's biggest families collided, the result was a time-travel adventure that felt like a fan-fiction fever dream. The Jetsons Meet the Flintstones technically premiered in 1987, but throughout the 90s, reruns cemented it as a staple of cartoon crossover culture. The story was pure chaos. George Jetson and his futuristic clan are accidentally hurled back in time, crashing straight into bedrock. Cue culture clash. The Stone Age meets the Space Age. What made this so memorable wasn't just the novelty of two iconic shows meeting, but how sincerely it leaned into the absurd premise. The Flintstones marveled at Jetsons' technology, while the Jetsons stumbled over prehistoric, modern inventions. Hanna-Barbera went all in, mining every gag possible from contrasting the past and future. The crossover also doubled as a generational bridge. Parents who grew up with Fred Flintstone laughed alongside kids who knew George Jetson, creating a rare shared cartoon experience. Critics at the time dismissed it as gimmicky, but viewers tuned in, proving nostalgia has its own superpower. Looking back, The Jetsons Meet the Flintstones feels like the starting gun for the 1990s crossover craze. It showed that if you had two beloved properties under one studio, nothing was too ridiculous to try. Did you root for the Jetsons' gadgets or for the Flintstones' Stone Age solutions to come out on top? Cartoon All-Stars to the rescue, 1990. Few crossovers were as ambitious or bizarre as Cartoon All-Stars to the rescue. Imagine every popular children's character in one special, united not for laughs, but to warn kids about drugs. This 1990 TV event brought together Garfield, Alvin and the Chipmunks, the Smurfs, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Winnie the Pooh, Alf, and even the Muppet Babies, all appearing side by side. The plot followed a teenager spiraling into drug use, with the cartoon characters staging an intervention. Yes, that really happened. These icons dragged him through surreal sequences designed to scare kids straight, including nightmarish drug trips and stern pep talks from Saturday morning heroes. What made it unforgettable was its sheer audacity. Never before, or since, had so many rival cartoon mascots appeared together under one banner. The special was simulcast on all major networks, introduced by then-President George H.W. Bush and First Lady Barbara Bush, proving how seriously the message was being pushed. For many kids, though, the anti-drug agenda was overshadowed by the thrill of seeing their favorite characters share the screen. When else would Bugs Bunny and Michelangelo stand shoulder to shoulder? Today, it's remembered more as a relic of the Just Say No era than as effective education. But ask yourself, did you watch it for the message? Or just to see if your favorite cartoon character would show up next? Scooby-Doo meets Johnny Bravo, 1997. By the late 90s, Cartoon Network was experimenting with wild crossover gags, and few were funnier than the time Scooby-Doo and Johnny Bravo teamed up. In this special episode, Johnny finds himself joining the Mystery Inc. gang on one of their trademark haunted house adventures. The humor was off the charts. Johnny's clueless bravado clashed perfectly with the gang's earnest ghost hunting routine. Watching him hit on Daphne, annoy Velma, and scream louder than Shaggy when spooked turned the episode into instant comedy gold. Even Scooby seemed baffled by his presence, making this crossover one of the most self-aware in cartoon history. What stood out was how naturally it worked. Scooby-Doo was already known for celebrity guest stars in earlier decades, but this was a Cartoon Network original character joining the tradition. It felt like a torch being passed, from the old guard of mystery-solving to the new wave of goofy, ironic animation that defined the 90s. The crossover also showcased Cartoon Network's new identity, pulling from Hanna-Barbera's deep archives while pushing fresh talent like Johnny Bravo into the spotlight. For many fans, it marked the first time they realized Cartoon Network was willing to poke fun at its own history. Were you cheering for Johnny to finally get a date with Daphne, or just laughing at how badly he botched every attempt? Batman, the animated series, and Superman, the animated series World's Finest, 1997. When DC decided to unite its two most iconic heroes in animation, fans got more than a simple team-up. They got a 3-part mini-movie event. World's Finest brought Batman and Superman together for the first time in the DC animated universe, and the result was a masterclass in superhero storytelling. The clash of personalities drove the drama. Superman, idealistic and straightforward, clashed with Batman's brooding paranoia and tactical mind. Add in a tangled subplot with Bruce Wayne dating Lois Lane, and suddenly this wasn't just about stopping villains. It was about egos, emotions, and trust. Of course, the action delivered. Watching Batman and Superman team up against Joker and Lex Luthor was a dream come true. The animation quality was top tier, the stakes felt cinematic, and the banter between the heroes made the crossover unforgettable. What cemented its legacy was how it opened the door for the larger DC animated universe. This wasn't a one-off stunt. It was the foundation for future crossovers leading to Justice League in 2001. At the time, though, it felt groundbreaking. Were you rooting for Batman's cunning, or Superman's strength, or secretly hoping the villains would outsmart them both? The Simpsons and The Critic, 1995. Not all crossovers were universally beloved. When The Simpsons invited Jay Sherman, the lead from the short-lived series The Critic, into Springfield for the episode A Star Is Burns, fans got a crossover that was as controversial as it was unusual. The setup: Springfield hosts a film festival, and Homer becomes a filmmaker. Jay Sherman, the snarky New York critic, is brought in as a guest judge, clashing with The Simpsons' world of slapstick humor. Some viewers loved the satire, enjoying the mix of Jay's dry wit with Homer's clueless antics. But behind the scenes, not everyone was happy. Matt Groening, creator of The Simpsons, publicly disowned the episode, arguing it was more about promoting The Critic than telling a true Simpsons story. Despite the controversy, the episode left its mark. It showed how crossovers could blur the line between satire and marketing, sparking debates that continue among fans to this day. And let's be honest, Jay Sherman telling Homer, "It stinks," became a catchphrase moment all its own. Did you laugh at the culture clash? Or side with Groening in thinking Springfield didn't need an outsider? Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain, 1993 to 1998. The Warner Brothers, and their sister Dot, were never shy about sharing the screen, but when Animaniacs spun off Pinky and the Brain, it created one of the most seamless crossover playgrounds of the 1990s. The two shows constantly overlapped, with the lab mice popping into Animaniacs skits before launching their own series, and the Warners returning the favor in meta cameos. What made this crossover magic was tone. Both shows thrived on breaking the fourth wall, lampooning pop culture, and delivering rapid-fire jokes that worked for kids and adults alike. Having Pinky and the Brain appear in Animaniacs sketches gave their quirky, world domination schemes an extra layer of absurdity, especially when Yakko or Dot mocked them mid-plot. The synergy also made Animaniacs feel like a shared universe, something rare in cartoons of the era. Kids didn't just watch one show. They were immersed in a self-referential comedy factory, where characters bounced between worlds like neighbors on the same lot. Looking back, it's easy to forget that Pinky and the Brain started as side characters. Without those crossovers, would they have ever graduated to their own series? The blend of clever writing and cartoon chaos made these appearances some of the most memorable moments of the decade. Did you tune in for the Warners' zany antics, or to see if Brain's plan for world domination might finally work this time? Dexter's Laboratory and Dial M for Monkey, 1996 to 1998. If you watched Dexter's Laboratory in the 90s, you remember the oddball spin-off segments tucked inside. Chief among them was Dial M for Monkey, where Dexter's lab monkey secretly moonlighted as a superhero. But what fans often forget is how gleefully Cartoon Network used these shorts as crossover goldmines. Monkey didn't just fight aliens and monsters, he rubbed elbows with parody versions of characters that were suspiciously close to Marvel and DC heroes. Viewers met Thor-like gods, Hulk-like beasts, and Justice friends who often wandered straight into Dexter's episodes. These moments blurred the line between Dexter's world and a full superhero spoof universe. The crossovers worked because they expanded Dexter's world without breaking its logic. Of course, Dexter's monkey would have his own superhero adventures. It was the kind of twist only Genndy Tartakovsky could deliver. And the humor? Spot on. Watching Monkey battle absurd villains, while Dexter remained completely unaware, gave the shorts their charm. By the time the Justice Friends became recurring characters, Dexter's Lab had essentially built a mini Cartoon Network multiverse. The seeds of modern crossover culture were planted right there in Dexter's basement. Did you watch for Dexter's experiments, or secretly hope Monkey would pop in with another insane crossover cameo? Power Rangers in Space and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. 1998. Shell-shocked. Few crossovers were more unexpected or more hyped than when the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles showed up on Power Rangers in Space. In the episode Shell-shocked, Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, and Michelangelo arrived in live-action form to help the Rangers battle evil. On paper, it was every kid's dream. The reality? Pure camp. The Turtles, fresh off their Next Mutation live-action series, were mind-controlled by the villain Astra Nema before eventually joining forces with the Rangers. Watching two of the 90s most popular toy-selling franchises fight side by side should have been legendary, but the execution was clunky, leaving fans divided. Still, it's impossible to deny the cultural buzz. For one night, two juggernauts of 90s kid culture collided. The crossover symbolized the height of corporate synergy, pulling from Saban's properties to squeeze maximum hype from fans. Kids didn't care about plot holes. They just wanted to see the Green Ranger high-five Michelangelo. Though often ridiculed today, Shell-shocked has earned cult status as a relic of pure 90s excess. Did you love it for the spectacle, or cringe at the awkward turtle suits trying to keep up with Ranger choreography? Captain Planet and The New Adventures of Johnny Quest, 1996. One of the strangest and most forgotten Cartoon Network experiments happened in the mid-90s, when Captain Planet and the Planeteers crossed over with The New Adventures of Johnny Quest. Titled The New Adventures of Johnny Quest, To Catch a Creature, the Special Twinskorn brought eco-heroes and globe-trotting adventurers together for a one-time mission. The plot saw the Quest team investigating an environmental disaster, only to collide with Captain Planet and the Planeteers, who were fighting the same threat. The result was part action-adventure, part eco-lesson, and completely surreal. Watching Race Bannon and Dr. Quest strategize alongside Ma Tai and Wheeler created a mix of tones that didn't always gel, but that's exactly why it's so memorable. The crossover stood out because it merged two very different audiences: fans of pulp-style adventure and kids raised on eco-conscious messages. Cartoon Network promoted it heavily, billing it as a bold TV event, but the special faded quickly from memory once it aired. Looking back, it's a fascinating artifact of the 90s cartoon culture, when networks weren't afraid to mash up properties just to see what happened. Did you tune in for Captain Planet's speeches, or were you more interested in Johnny Quest facing villains outside his usual rogues gallery? Darkwing Duck and DuckTales, 1991 to 1992. Disney afternoon shows were already connected by tone and style, but Darkwing Duck took things further by sprinkling in cameos from DuckTales. Launchpad McQuack famously crossed over as Darkwing's sidekick after debuting in DuckTales, instantly creating continuity between the two shows. The crossover didn't stop there. Gizmo Duck, another DuckTales favorite, swooped into Darkwing Duck episodes, bringing his mechanical mayhem to Saint Canard. These appearances gave fans the sense that both shows existed in the same duck-filled universe, long before Disney officially acknowledged the shared continuity. What stood out was how natural the mix felt. Darkwing's slapstick superhero antics meshed perfectly with the adventurous tone of DuckTales. The cameos weren't gimmicks. They genuinely enriched the stories and made the universe feel bigger. Kids suddenly realized their Disney favorites could pop up anywhere, sparking endless speculation about who might appear next. Though overlooked today, these crossovers paved the way for Disney's later shared universe experiments, like DuckTales 2017, which leaned heavily into continuity. But back in the early 90s, the thrill was simpler. Seeing your favorite characters from one show crash into another. Were you watching for Darkwing's "Let's Get Dangerous" moments, or just hoping Scrooge McDuck might stroll in one day? Tiny Toon Adventures and Animaniacs, 1993 to 1995. Before the Warners had their own show, they were already crossing paths with their cartoon cousins. Tiny Toon Adventures often teased or referenced characters that would later appear in Animaniacs, creating a sense of continuity between the two zany universes. Once Animaniacs launched, the crossovers flowed both ways, with quick gags, background cameos, and self-aware nods that reminded fans these worlds weren't far apart. The crossovers worked because both shows thrived on meta-humor. Characters would break the fourth wall, call out other Warner Brothers properties, or even parody the network itself. Seeing Buster Bunny acknowledge Yakko, or Pinky and the Brain lampoon Tiny Toons, felt like a wink from the creators directly to the audience. What's fascinating is how subtle these interactions were compared to more blatant crossovers. They weren't marketed as events. They were Easter eggs hidden in the chaos. For fans paying close attention, it created a rich sense of shared history that elevated both shows. Looking back, these cross-gags made it clear that Warner Brothers. Animation was building a comedy empire where nothing was too sacred to parody, and every character was fair game for a cameo. Did you catch these sly crossovers live? Or did you only notice them years later on VHS tapes and streaming reruns? Early DC Animated Universe crossovers, 1990s. Long before the Justice League hit TV screens, the 90s DC cartoons were laying the groundwork with crossover experiments. Batman. The animated series set the stage, but when Superman, the animated series, premiered, the floodgates opened. Fans saw Flash, Green Lantern, and even Aquaman pop into Superman's world, testing the waters for a bigger team-up. These weren't throwaway cameos. Flash's playful rivalry with Superman became legendary, giving fans their first animated Fastest Man Alive versus Man of Steel showdown. Green Lantern's appearance hinted at a cosmic scope, while Aquaman brought political intrigue to Metropolis. Each crossover teased the idea of a larger shared world, something fans had been craving since comic books first introduced the Justice League. The impact was huge. By connecting these shows, Warner Brothers was quietly building trust with its audience, proving it could handle a larger, interconnected story. When Justice League finally debuted in 2001, it felt like a natural extension of seeds planted throughout the 1990s. For kids at the time, though, the thrill was simpler. Batman showing up in Superman's city, or Superman cracking jokes with Flash. Did you watch these episodes as pieces of a bigger puzzle, or just lose your mind every time two heroes shared the screen? Scooby-Doo meets Batman, 1990. Though the original episodes aired back in the 1970s, the 1990s brought them roaring back when Cartoon Network and syndication introduced a whole new generation to one of the strangest crossovers ever, Scooby-Doo teaming up with Batman and Robin. For 90s kids, it felt brand new, because these reruns were marketed as part of Cartoon Network's crossover events, making it seem like Gotham's Dark Knight had officially entered Scooby's universe. The premise was as campy as you'd expect. Mystery Inc. stumbled onto cases involving crooks like the Joker and Penguin, only to be joined by the Caped Crusader and Boy Wonder. Seeing Shaggy and Scooby bumble alongside Batman's no-nonsense detective work was comedy. Gold. Scooby snacks mixed with Bat gadgets. Velma provided brains while Batman handled brawn, and somehow it all clicked. What made these reruns unforgettable in the 90s was timing. Batman was experiencing a huge revival thanks to Batman, the animated series. Pairing him with Scooby-Doo tapped both nostalgia and current hype, drawing in kids who might never have seen the older crossovers. It felt like two icons from totally different tones colliding and somehow working together. Looking back, it was a rare crossover that actually felt timeless. Did you tune in because you loved Scooby's haunted hijinks? Or because you couldn't resist seeing Batman's Batmobile parked outside a creepy mansion? Scooby-Doo and Courage the Cowardly Dog. Though their full-length movie wouldn't arrive until decades later, Cartoon Network teased the possibility of Scooby-Doo and Courage teaming up way back in the 90s. Through promotional bumpers, the Cowardly Great Dane and the even more cowardly Pink Dog crossed paths in hilarious, awkward interactions. These bumpers leaned into their similarities. Both dogs trembling at supernatural threats, both desperately clinging to their human companions, and both somehow stumbling into heroism despite their fears. The humor came from watching two scaredy dogs try to out-scream each other, while Velma or Muriel calmly handled the chaos. Fans loved it because it felt natural. Courage was essentially a modern, twisted cousin of Scooby, and pairing them together was too perfect to ignore. Even though the bumpers were short, they sparked endless what-if conversations among kids. What if Scooby joined Courage in nowhere, Kansas? What if Courage had to solve mysteries with Mystery Inc.? The official crossover didn't come until 2021's Straight Outta Nowhere, but these 90s bumpers planted the seed decades earlier. Did you catch them live on Cartoon Network, or only realize later that the network had been teasing this dream crossover all along? Garfield and Friends. While not always thought of as a crossover, Garfield and Friends quietly gave audiences one every Saturday. The show regularly switched between Garfield's sarcastic antics and adventures on the farm with the U.S. Acres cast, blending two separate comic strips into one cartoon series. The crossovers weren't always direct. Garfield didn't often stroll into the barn, but the two worlds shared screen time, creating a rotating showcase that felt like a single bizarre universe. The humor of Garfield's laziness contrasted perfectly with the slapstick energy of Orson Pig, Wade Duck, and Roy Rooster. What made it memorable was the variety. One moment you were watching Garfield scheme for lasagna, the next you were thrown into farmyard chaos. It was an unusual programming decision at the time, but it worked, giving kids two shows in one. Occasionally, Garfield would even wink at the audience and comment on the farm segment, blurring the line between them. Though U.S. Acres has largely been forgotten outside these episodes, the crossover gave it a legacy far beyond its comic strip run. For fans, it was proof that even a lazy cat could share airtime. Did you tune in just for Garfield, or secretly find yourself laughing harder at the farm animals' misadventures, Space Ghost Coast to Coast, and Hanna-Barbera cameos 1994 to 1999? Before Adult Swim was even a concept, Cartoon Network took a forgotten superhero and turned him into a late-night talk show host. Space Ghost Coast to Coast was already bizarre, but what made it legendary were the constant cameos from other Hanna-Barbera characters. Zorak became the bitter band leader, Moltar ran the control room, and random characters from the studio's vault, like the Herculoids or Birdman, would drop in for surreal appearances. These weren't heroic cameos either. Characters were reimagined as washed-up celebrities, grouchy co-workers, or awkward interviewees, turning the crossover into a running gag. The brilliance lay in its irony. Space Ghost was once a straight-laced Saturday morning hero. By the 90s, he was hosting awkward interviews with real celebrities, while his sidekicks heckled him from the sidelines. The cameos worked because they flipped nostalgia on its head. Your childhood heroes weren't heroic anymore. They were punchlines. This crossover experiment quietly launched Cartoon Network's adult animation brand, paving the way for shows like Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law. But for fans of the time, it was just weird, funny, and unforgettable. Did you tune in for the talk show chaos, or just to see which obscure Hanna-Barbera character would be dragged out of retirement next? Sonic the Hedgehog crossover promos, 1990s. In the 90s, Sonic wasn't just a video game mascot. He had two competing cartoons. One was the lighthearted adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, packed with slapstick and Robotnik gags. The other, known as Sat-AM, was darker, grittier, and gave Sonic a resistance army fighting for freedom. Fans rarely saw the two collide, except in crossover-style promotional events. Sega and DIC Entertainment used TV ads and comic tie-ins to bring the two versions of Sonic together. It was surreal to see the goofy, chili dog-loving Sonic share the stage with the brooding, freedom-fighting version. For kids, it raised bizarre questions. Were there two Sonics? Which was the real one? The crossovers didn't last long, but they showed how powerful Sonic's brand was in the 90s. He could exist in two totally different universes and still command loyalty. Today, those promos feel like a glimpse of an alternate multiverse before that concept was cool. Did you cheer for the wacky slapstick Sonic, or prefer the darker, serious Sonic? Or maybe you just wanted Robotnik to lose no matter which version showed. The Mask animated series and Ace Ventura, 1996. What happens when two of Jim Carrey's biggest 90s movie roles collide in cartoon form? You get one of the strangest crossovers of the decade. The Mask animated series meeting Ace Ventura, pet detective. In the episode The Ace Man Cometh, Ace stumbles into Edge City, where Stanley Ipkiss is already battling villains with the help of his green-faced alter ego. The result was pure chaos. Ace's non-stop slapstick collided with the Mask's cartoonish reality bending, creating a battle of who could be more over the top. The crossover worked because both shows already thrived on absurd humor. Watching Ace bumble through the Mask's insane world was like seeing two different flavors of the same wild energy clash. For kids who loved Carrey's movies, it was a dream come true, even if Carrey himself wasn't voicing the characters. Though often overlooked today, this crossover captured a moment when studios were eager to milk every ounce of their movie-to-cartoon franchises. Did you root for Ace's detective skills, or just laugh as the Mask turned reality upside down? The Big Game, 1999. Leave it to Cartoon Network to turn football season into an animated spectacle. In 1999, the network aired The Big Game, a parody sports broadcast where characters from across its shows competed in a cartoon football match. Johnny Bravo strutted onto the field, Dexter tried to out-invent his rivals, and Cow and Chicken added their brand of absurd comedy. Even Ed and Eddie got in on the action, bumbling their way through plays they had no business running. It wasn't a traditional crossover episode. It was a full-blown event, complete with announcers, crowd shots, and running gags that tied all the shows together. What made it so fun was the sheer randomness. It didn't matter who won. The joy came from seeing wildly different characters thrown into the same ridiculous game. Cartoon Network was testing the waters for large-scale crossovers, and fans loved it. Sadly, The Big Game aired only once and became one of those "did I really see that?" memories. But for those who caught it live, it was proof that the Cartoon Network universe was alive and kicking. Did you watch for the football parody, or just to see your favorite characters tackle each other for bragging rights? Freakazoid and Animaniacs cameos, 1995 to 1997. If there was one show that lived for crossovers, it was Freakazoid. The zany superhero series constantly pulled in cameos from other Warner Brothers cartoons, especially Animaniacs. Yakko, Wakko, and Dot popped up in jokes, while Pinky and the Brain were name-dropped in gags that blurred the lines between universes. The mix worked perfectly because both shows thrived on surreal, fourth-wall-breaking humor. Freakazoid himself was essentially a walking parody of every superhero trope, so tossing in cartoon celebrities felt natural. One moment he'd be saving the city, the next he'd be riffing with Yakko about how absurd the script was. What made it unforgettable was the energy. Freakazoid never cared about rules or continuity, and the cameos reinforced that anything could happen. For fans, it was like being part of an inside joke, one giant Warner Brothers cartoon family having the time of their lives. Though the series was short-lived, those crossovers left a lasting impression. Did you tune in for the superhero antics, or just to see which Animaniacs character would wander in next? The 90s were more than just cartoons. They were a collision of worlds, universes blending in ways that felt both chaotic and magical. Some of these crossovers were clunky, others legendary, but all of them captured the wild experimentation of the decade. So here's the question. Which forgotten crossover do you remember most, and which one completely slipped your mind until now? Drop your favorite in the comments, hit subscribe for more hidden gems, and let's keep the nostalgia alive together.